He got pushed, mocked, and blamed, all while the teacher looked away. How many more black children have to suffer in silence before adults finally speak up? They told a 9-year-old boy he couldn't play soccer, not because he broke the rules, but because of the color of his skin. If that's how racism begins, then how do we stop it before it destroys another childhood? The sun had barely climbed above the rooftops of Lincoln, Georgia, when Jeremiah Brooks stood in front of his new school. Lincoln Elementary stretched out in front of him like a strange new world. Neat brick walls, a yellow-painted crosswalk, and the smell of fresh mulch from the flower beds. His small hands clutched a worn sketchbook to his chest, the corners frayed from years of use. He wore a clean polo shirt, khaki pants a bit too long, and sneakers still white from the box. He looked like any other third grader, but he already knew he wasn't. "Go on now, Jay. You got this," his father, Marcus, said from behind him. His voice was low, solid, like a man who had spent years swallowing storms. Jeremiah turned, uncertain. "What if nobody talks to me?" Marcus crouched to his level. "You talk to yourself then. Out loud. Show 'em you're not afraid to be heard." Jeremiah gave a half-smile, the kind kids use when they're trying not to cry. The school bell rang. Children scattered like bees across the yard. Jeremiah took a breath, walked through the front doors, and entered a hallway buzzing with chatter and the squeak of shoes on polished tile. Inside his classroom, he found his seat. Third row, second desk. Mrs. Davenport, the teacher, smiled warmly at him but didn't introduce him to the class. Instead, she said, "Okay everyone, let's settle down." Jeremiah looked around. The other kids were already paired up, talking and laughing. No one looked at him. No one asked his name. Later, during morning recess, he wandered toward the soccer field, sketchbook under one arm. He loved soccer, even if he wasn't the best at it. A group of boys had formed 2 teams. Jeremiah hovered near the edge, trying not to look too eager. A girl noticed him, Maddie Carson. She had strawberry blonde hair, freckles, and a calm, curious gaze. "Want to play?" she asked, walking over. Jeremiah nodded, relieved. She waved him over. "Hey guys, he can be on my team." But before he could step onto the grass, Kyle Thompson blocked his path. He was taller, louder, the kind of boy who always wanted the last word. "Oh no, he can't play," Kyle said flatly. Maddie frowned. "Why not?" Kyle smirked. "Because he's not one of us." Jeremiah froze. Maddie turned sharply. "What's that supposed to mean?" Kyle shrugged. "My dad says people like him don't belong here anyway." Tanner, another boy, chuckled. "Let him draw on the sidewalk or something. This is a game, not art class." Jeremiah lowered his eyes. Something inside him tightened, something hot and confusing. He didn't fully understand what had just happened, but it didn't feel like teasing. It felt personal. Maddie looked at Jeremiah and whispered, "Don't listen to them. They're jerks." But Jeremiah had already stepped back. He didn't want Maddie to fight for him. He wanted to disappear. He sat on the blacktop alone and opened his sketchbook. The pages were filled with superheroes, animals, cityscapes. Today, he drew a boy standing outside a fence, watching others play. When the bell rang, he didn't move. At home that evening, his father cooked spaghetti. Jeremiah sat at the kitchen table, silent. "How was school?" Marcus asked, stirring sauce on the stove. Jeremiah poked at his noodles. "Fine." Marcus turned. "That's not an answer." Jeremiah hesitated, then mumbled, "They didn't want me to play soccer." Marcus leaned on the counter, eyes locked. "What do you mean, they didn't want you to play?" Jeremiah shrugged. "Said I didn't belong." Silence stretched across the room. Marcus exhaled slowly, deeply. He walked over and knelt beside his son. "Jay, you listen to me. Some people out there, they look at you and see what they fear. They won't say it out loud, but you'll feel it. Doesn't mean they're right. Doesn't mean you stop trying." Jeremiah looked up. "But why do they think I'm different?" Marcus's voice dropped. "Because they were taught to. And if no one tells them otherwise, they'll stay that way." There was a long pause between them. "Do I have to tell them?" Jeremiah finally asked. Marcus nodded. "You don't just tell him. You show him. Every day you show up. Every time you stay kind, stay strong." Jeremiah didn't reply. But later that night, when he opened his sketchbook again, he drew a boy, same as before, but this time he was climbing the fence. The boy still wasn't playing yet, but he wasn't standing still anymore. The next morning, Jeremiah walked into class quietly and took his seat, third row, second desk. He kept his sketchbook tucked under his chair this time. He wasn't sure why. Maybe he just didn't feel like drawing. Maybe he didn't want the other kids to see something else they could laugh at. Mrs. Davenport stood at the front of the classroom. "Good morning, class," she said with her usual gentle smile. "Let's start with a few warm-up questions. Who remembers what we learned about animal habitats yesterday?" Jeremiah's hand went up. Fast. He had studied last night, even looked up extra facts in an old science book his dad had picked up from the library. But Mrs. Davenport didn't see him. Or maybe she didn't want to. "Kyle," she called out. "You had something to share?" Kyle looked up, surprised. He hadn't raised his hand. "Bears live in caves," he guessed. "That's right," she said quickly. "Very good." Jeremiah's hand slowly dropped. He didn't say a word. Maddie leaned over and whispered, "You were going to say something, right?" Jeremiah just shook his head. "Doesn't matter." Later, during reading group, the students were split into pairs. Jeremiah ended up without a partner. Mrs. Davenport didn't notice. She was busy helping Kyle and Tanner, who were giggling over a joke in their book. Jeremiah opened his own book and began reading quietly to himself. The words on the page blurred a little, like they were trying to slip away. It wasn't that the work was hard, he just couldn't focus. He kept thinking about how invisible he felt. At lunch, the cafeteria buzzed with noise. Jeremiah stood in line, holding his tray. When he got to the front, the lunch lady handed him a single scoop of mashed potatoes and a spoonful of green beans. The boy in front of him, Kyle, had been given an extra chicken patty. "Can I have one too?" Jeremiah asked softly. The lunch lady glanced at him, then looked away. "We're low today," she muttered. "But you just gave him two," Jeremiah said, pointing to Kyle, who was already walking off with his tray piled high. She sighed. "Move along, sweetheart. Don't hold up the line." Jeremiah sat alone again. He didn't bother trying to join anyone this time. Maddie walked over with her tray and sat down across from him. "Why do they treat you like that?" she asked, pushing a cookie across the table. Jeremiah looked at the cookie but didn't touch it. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe I'm just not one of them." Maddie frowned. "That's not right." He shrugged. "It's just how it is." There was a pause. Maddie's eyes scanned the room. Most of the kids were laughing, talking, passing notes. No one seemed to notice that Jeremiah was still sitting in the corner, head down, fingers tracing the ridges of his lunch tray, like he was trying to draw a map out of that place. "Do you miss your old school?" Maddie asked gently. Jeremiah looked up. "Sometimes. There were more kids like me." He didn't mean just black kids. He meant kids who didn't judge him before knowing him. Kids who didn't look at his hair, or his skin, or the way he spoke like it meant something was wrong. When the bell rang and recess began, he didn't run outside like the others. He walked slowly, dragging his feet a little. On the playground, the laughter of the other kids felt like it belonged to a different world. A brighter world he wasn't invited into. He found a quiet corner near the fence and sat down on the grass. From across the yard, Kyle and Tanner glanced over and smirked. "Drawing again?" Kyle called out. Jeremiah didn't answer. He didn't even open his sketchbook. He just sat there, letting the wind move the grass around him. The only thing still was him. And for the first time, he wondered what it would take for someone, anyone, to truly see him. By Thursday, something had shifted. It wasn't just the stares or the whispers anymore. It was the way people moved around Jeremiah, like his presence made things uncomfortable. Like he was something to avoid. During morning reading time, Mrs. Davenport asked the class to take turns reading aloud from their books. When it was Jeremiah's turn, he read clearly with expression. He liked reading. It made him feel like his voice mattered. But when he finished, there was silence. No smile from Mrs. Davenport. No nod. She simply looked down at her clipboard and called on Kyle next. Kyle stood up, cracked a joke about the main character, and read with a goofy voice. The class erupted in laughter. Mrs. Davenport chuckled and said, "Very creative, Kyle." Jeremiah felt the heat rise in his face. He sat back in his chair, folded his arms, and stared out the window. He wasn't sure what hurt more, the way Kyle mocked the story, or the way the teacher praised him for it. Later that day at recess, Maddie approached Jeremiah near the edge of the basketball court. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded but didn't say much. "Want to play kickball?" she offered. Jeremiah shrugged. "They don't want me on their team." "I want you on mine," she said, pulling him toward the field. They joined the line of kids waiting to play. Kyle and Tanner were already picking teams. When Maddie called out, "We'll take Jeremiah," Kyle rolled his eyes. "Nope," Kyle snapped. "He cheats." Maddie looked stunned. "What are you talking about?" Kyle smirked. "I've seen how he plays. He always says he touched base when he didn't. You can't trust him." "That's not true," Maddie said firmly. Tanner added, he got a free lunch last week. Bet his dad told the school he was poor. Jeremiah stood frozen. I don't cheat, he said quietly. And we're not poor. Kyle stepped closer. Whatever. You just play the sympathy card. You're not one of us. Mrs. Davenport was standing nearby, watching the field. Jeremiah looked at her, hoping for something, anything. She turned away. Maddie stared in disbelief. Are you serious? You're just gonna let them say that. But the teacher had already started walking toward the other side of the yard. Jeremiah clenched his fists. His throat tightened. He didn't know what to do with all the feelings crashing inside him. Embarrassment, anger, confusion. And above all, that sinking sense of being completely alone. He didn't play kickball that day. Instead, he sat on the swings, watching the game from a distance. Maddie eventually joined him, her sneakers kicking the dust at her feet. I don't get it, she said. Why do they act like this? Jeremiah didn't answer right away. Finally, he muttered, because they can. That night at home, he didn't say much during dinner. Marcus noticed. Rough day again, he asked. Jeremiah nodded. They said I cheat. That we're poor. That I don't belong. Marcus's jaw tightened. He put down his fork, folded his arms across the table. And what did you say? I didn't. I just didn't know what to say. Marcus leaned in. You're not the one who should feel ashamed here. Don't ever carry their garbage like it's yours. Jeremiah looked down at his plate. His food had gone cold. He whispered, I don't think they even see me. Not really. Marcus sat back in his chair, silent for a moment. They see you, he said finally. They just pretend not to. Because if they did, they'd have to face everything they've been ignoring. Later that night, Jeremiah opened his sketchbook. He drew a playground, but this time it was surrounded by a chain-link fence. Inside, the kids were all the same. Outside, one child stood alone watching. He added a caption beneath it in small block letters. You don't get to decide where I belong. By the end of the week, Jeremiah was tired. Not physically, emotionally. Tired of dodging insults. Tired of pretending he didn't hear them. Tired of shrinking, so the world around him could stay comfortable. Friday's lunch started like every other, Jeremiah waiting quietly in line with his tray, avoiding eye contact. Maddie wasn't at school that day. Her mom had taken her to a dentist appointment, and her absence left Jeremiah even more exposed. Kyle was just ahead of him in line, Tanner right behind. The two were whispering and laughing under their breath. As they reached the front, the cafeteria lady greeted Kyle with a cheerful smile and gave him an extra scoop of tater tots. When Jeremiah stepped forward, she barely looked up. 1 scoop of vegetables, 1 square of dry pizza. No milk, he asked softly. Out, she said without checking. He walked away, tray in hand, sat at the edge of the lunchroom. A few minutes later, he heard it, Kyle's voice behind him. Hey Brooks, you dropped this. A thud followed. Jeremiah looked down. A carton of chocolate milk had hit the side of his tray, spilling across his pizza. The table burst into laughter. Tanner slapped Kyle's shoulder, grinning. Jeremiah stood up, his eyes locked on Kyle. His fingers curled tightly around the edge of the tray. Kyle laughed harder. Relax, man. It's just a joke. You people always get so dramatic. Jeremiah didn't speak. He walked away slowly, head low, tray dripping. But something inside him had snapped. Not like a branch that breaks quietly. Like a wire pulled too tight for too long. Recess came next. The sun was high, casting long shadows across the playground. The soccer ball rolled out onto the grass. Jeremiah stood at the edge of the field, arms crossed. Kyle and Tanner were already playing, pushing each other, shouting. One of the younger kids passed the ball in Jeremiah's direction. He stopped it with his foot. Then Kyle jogged over. Didn't I tell you not to touch that? Jeremiah didn't move. Kyle stepped closer. What, you deaf now? Jeremiah kicked the ball past him. Not hard. Just enough to send a message. Kyle shoved him in the shoulder. Don't get smart with me. Jeremiah's body tensed. He stared at Kyle, eyes narrowed, and for the first time in days, he didn't look away. Then he shoved back. Hard. Kyle stumbled, caught off balance. You don't get to talk to me like that, Jeremiah said, voice low, shaking. What did you say? Kyle barked, stepping back toward him. Tanner came running. Other kids gathered around. Freaking psycho, Kyle muttered. Before anyone could stop it, Jeremiah stepped forward and pushed again, this time with both hands. Kyle hit the ground. His elbow scraped the concrete. Silence spread. Then came the sound of footsteps. Mrs. Davenport rushed across the yard. What is going on here? She looked at Kyle on the ground, at Jeremiah breathing hard. "He attacked me," Kyle shouted, pointing. Mrs. Davenport didn't ask questions. "Jeremiah Brooks," she said sternly. "Principal's office." "Now." Jeremiah looked at her. He looked at the other kids, some confused, some smirking. Then he walked off without a word. The walk down the hall was long. The school that had always felt distant now felt like a trap closing in. Inside the office, he sat on a small chair. His legs swung slightly off the floor. No one spoke to him for the first 5 minutes. When the door opened, it wasn't the principal. It was Marcus. He had come straight from work, still wearing his maintenance uniform, dust on his boots, sweat on his brow. Jeremiah looked up. His eyes were glassy. Marcus didn't say anything right away, just sat beside his son. After a moment, Jeremiah whispered, "I tried to walk away. I really did." Marcus nodded once. "Then I'm proud of you." There was no anger in his voice, only resolve. And underneath it, a grief so quiet, it could break your heart. The video of the playground incident surfaced before the end of the day. A 5th grader had caught it on a phone and uploaded it to a student message board. From there it spread fast. A shaky clip, just over 30 seconds. It showed Jeremiah pushing Kyle to the ground. It didn't show the taunts. It didn't catch the first shove. But it was enough to light a fire. By the next morning, the school office was flooded with phone calls. Some parents were outraged. Others were concerned. A few asked the real question, what led up to it? Inside the school, the atmosphere had shifted. Teachers whispered in the break room. Students stared in the halls. Some kids gave Jeremiah a wide berth, like he was radioactive. Others looked at him with something close to respect. Or fear. It was hard to tell. Marcus arrived early for the scheduled meeting with the principal. He had traded his work boots for worn leather shoes, but the oil stains on his hands were still visible. He waited at the end of the hallway, seated in a chair that seemed too small for him. Jeremiah sat beside him, his legs still swinging, eyes focused on the floor tiles. "You good?" Marcus asked. Jeremiah gave a small nod. "I guess. You're not in trouble with me," Marcus said softly. "You told the truth. That's what matters." The door to the principal's office opened. "Mr. Brooks, Jeremiah, come on in," the principal said. They stepped inside. Kyle was already there, seated beside his mother, a woman in a crisp beige pantsuit with her arms folded tightly across her chest. "Let's begin," the principal said, clearing his throat. "First, I want to acknowledge the seriousness of what happened yesterday." Marcus leaned forward. "You mean the part where my son got shoved and called names? Or just the part that made it to video?" Kyle's mom jumped in. "Your son attacked mine unprovoked." Jeremiah sat up straighter. "That's not true." She ignored him. "Kyle is shaken. He's never been hit before." Marcus's jaw clenched. Maybe it's time he learned how it feels. "Excuse me?" she snapped. "I said," Marcus repeated calmly, "maybe it's time someone held your boy accountable. My son's been coming home quiet for weeks. You think this just happened out of nowhere?" The principal raised a hand. "Let's please stay civil. We're here to understand what led to this and how to move forward." Jeremiah looked at Kyle. "You called me names. You said I don't belong. You laughed when your friend threw milk on my lunch. You shoved me first." Kyle shrugged. "I was just joking." "You pushed me," Jeremiah said again. "And I pushed back." The room went quiet. The principal turned to Kyle. "Is that true?" Kyle didn't answer. His mom interrupted. He was defending himself. "That video." Marcus cut her off. "That video only shows what you want to see. It doesn't show the cafeteria. It doesn't show the classroom. It doesn't show all the times the adults here looked the other way." Mrs. Davenport was called in halfway through the meeting. She looked uncomfortable, her hands wringing nervously. "I didn't realize things had gotten this bad," she said. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "You saw it," he said. "You just didn't say anything." Mrs. Davenport looked at Jeremiah, then quickly down at the floor. "I didn't want to make things worse." Jeremiah finally spoke up. "You made it worse by doing nothing." There it was. The truth sitting heavy in the room. No one responded for a long moment. Eventually, the principal cleared his throat. "We're going to take this seriously. There will be consequences for everyone involved. But more importantly, we need to make sure this never happens again." Marcus nodded once. "Then start by teaching your teachers how to see what they don't want to see." Jeremiah turned to his dad as they stood to leave. "Are they really going to do something this time?" Marcus rested a hand on his son's shoulder. "We'll make sure they do." That afternoon, Maddie returned to school. She found Jeremiah by the lockers. "I saw the video," she said. "It's not fair what they're saying." Jeremiah didn't reply. "I wrote something," she added. "I gave it to the principal." He looked at her, surprised. "A letter?" She nodded. "I told them everything. About what Kyle said. About how no one did anything." Jeremiah swallowed hard. His voice was low. "Thanks." Maddie smiled a little. Someone had to. And for the first time in days, Jeremiah felt just a little less alone. Jeremiah didn't return to school until Monday. Marcus had kept him home Friday. Not as punishment, but for peace. A day without whispers. A day without eyes watching, judging. A day to breathe. That morning, the hallway felt different. Not louder, not quieter, just different. Like something invisible had shifted. Some kids looked away when Jeremiah passed. Others stared longer than before. But no one said a word. He walked into class with his head up. Mrs. Davenport offered a soft good morning, but her voice carried hesitation, not warmth. She didn't ask him to share. She didn't mention the incident. No one did. At lunch, Jeremiah sat at his usual spot. This time, a few extra trays had space around him. No one joined him. Until Maddie. She walked over and sat down like it was the most normal thing in the world. She placed a folded piece of paper next to his tray. "They posted it," she said. "You're drawing." Jeremiah looked up. "The playground sketch. It's in the hallway. By the main office." He blinked. "How?" "The principal asked the art teacher if you had anything that could go up for Respect Week." She showed them that one. The one with the fence. Jeremiah stared at her, unsure of how to feel. "I didn't say yes," he said quietly. "I know," Maddie replied. "But maybe it's good they saw it. Maybe they need to." He didn't answer. Later that day, during class, the guidance counselor entered the room. Her name was Ms. Keller. She usually spoke with soft tones and smiled too much, but today she looked serious. "Today," she began, "we're going to talk about something important, how we treat each other." The class groaned. "This isn't about tattling or being polite," she continued. "This is about respect, and understanding how small actions hurt more than you think." She passed around a worksheet with a picture of a tree. Each branch was labeled, words, looks, silence, laughter. "We're going to write down examples of how people can hurt others, without ever laying a hand." The room was silent. Tanner stared at his paper, then scratched something quickly and flipped it over. Kyle sat stiffly in his chair, arms crossed. Jeremiah hesitated. Then slowly he wrote, calling someone a name and saying it was just a joke. Not picking someone because they looked different. Looking away when you should speak up. After class, Ms. Keller pulled Jeremiah aside. "I saw your drawing," she said. "It said a lot." Jeremiah looked at the floor. "I didn't think they'd hang it up." "Sometimes," she said gently, "our words don't reach people. But art gets through." There was a pause. "You don't have to speak all the time," she added. "But when you do, people should listen." Jeremiah nodded slowly. "I don't want to be angry all the time." Ms. Keller smiled faintly. "Then let's help others understand why you're angry." That evening, Jeremiah sat at the kitchen table with his sketchbook open. He wasn't drawing fences this time. He was sketching kids, different ones, smiling, playing, connected. Marcus walked in, saw the page, and sat across from him. "New project?" he asked. Jeremiah nodded. "The counselor wants to put up a mural for Respect Week." "You gonna do it?" Jeremiah hesitated. "I don't know. What if they forget again after all this?" Marcus leaned forward. "Then you remind them. You don't fight for today. You fight so the next kid doesn't have to." Jeremiah looked at him, the pencil in his hand hovering over the page. "Do you think it'll matter?" Marcus nodded. "Not to everybody. But to somebody? Yeah, it'll matter." For the first time in a while, Jeremiah smiled. Not big, not wide, but real. And that was enough to begin again. By Wednesday, whispers had turned into conversations. Something was happening at Lincoln Elementary. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. The mural project was announced during the morning announcements. As part of Respect and Equity Week, the principal said over the intercom, "We'll be creating a school mural to represent unity." A few students have already been selected to help lead the design. Jeremiah's name was the first one called. When he heard it, his pencil stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned toward him. A few surprised glances. Some nods. And a quiet "good for you" from Maddie. He wasn't sure how to feel. He hadn't said yes yet. That afternoon, Ms. Keller found him by the water fountain. "I know it's a big ask," she said, But you've already said something powerful without saying much at all. Jeremiah looked at her. I didn't think anyone cared about the drawing. She smiled. They do now. He thought about it for a long time. Then he nodded. Okay, I'll do it. The next few days, Jeremiah stayed after school with Maddie and 3 other students, 2 fifth graders and a girl from his class named Olivia. Ms. Keller supervised as they planned sketches for the mural. Jeremiah took the lead. He wanted the mural to show something that wasn't just about peace or vague words like inclusion. He wanted it to show what real change looked like. We draw a bridge, he said. One side's gray cracked. The other side is color. Kids walking across. Maddie added, put words on the bridge. Words people use to hurt, but they're getting smaller the farther the kids walk. Olivia nodded. And at the end they're smiling, holding hands, like they made it. Jeremiah sketched it quickly on paper. The others watched in silence. By Friday, the outline of the mural was painted on the long cinderblock wall in the main hallway. Teachers stopped to take pictures. Parents passing by after pickup stared a little longer. Even Mrs. Davenport came by. She stood behind the group, watching as Jeremiah painted in deep blue outlines along the bridge. It's powerful, she said quietly. Jeremiah didn't turn. Thanks. She hesitated. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner. He paused, brush in hand. It's not just about saying something, he replied. It's about doing something. Mrs. Davenport nodded slowly. You're right. And for once, she didn't try to explain herself. On Monday, the school gathered in the gym for the official unveiling. Jeremiah stood off to the side. He didn't want to speak, but the principal insisted on giving the students who worked on the mural a chance to say a few words. Maddie nudged him. You don't have to say a lot. Just be real. He walked to the microphone, heart pounding. I didn't ask to be different, he began. I just wanted to be seen, to be treated like I mattered. The gym was silent. This mural is for anyone who ever felt left out, or invisible, or like they had to act smaller so other people could feel big. He stopped, looked at the faces staring back, and it's for the people who are ready to do better. He stepped back. There was no applause at first, just stillness, and then slowly it came. Jeremiah sat back down beside Maddie. You crushed it, she whispered. He didn't smile. Not yet. But inside, something heavy had lifted. Not everything had changed, but something had started. And sometimes that's all it takes. Monday afternoon, sunlight streamed through the hallway windows, casting golden rectangles across the newly painted mural. The final brush strokes had dried. The bridge was complete. Students passed by quietly, some stopping to trace the bright colors with their eyes. Others walked faster, unsure of how to react. But they looked, and they noticed. Just after dismissal, the principal stood in front of the mural, flanked by Ms. Keller and Mrs. Davenport. Several parents gathered too, some holding their phones, some just watching. Jeremiah stood to the side, near Maddie. He wasn't holding a brush or a speech this time. Just his sketchbook, clutched loosely under one arm. The principal stepped forward. Today, we honor the voices of our students. This mural is not just art. It's a message, a reflection, a challenge. Then, he turned to Jeremiah. Would you like to say anything before we close? Jeremiah looked down, then back at the mural. His heart thudded, not with fear this time, but with purpose. He walked slowly to the center. I didn't think I'd be standing here, he began, voice quiet but steady. When I first came to this school, I felt small, like I had to disappear to survive. A few people shifted in place. He kept going. People said things, did things, but the hardest part was when no one said anything at all. He paused. Silence can hurt more than words. Marcus stood in the back, arms crossed, eyes locked on his son. Not with worry, with pride. Jeremiah continued. I drew that fence because that's how it felt. Like there was this line, this invisible wall keeping me out. But I learned something this year. You don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to tell the truth. His eyes scanned the crowd. This mural is for every kid who's ever been told they don't belong. For every kid who's been left out, pushed aside, or made to feel like less. It's a reminder. He stepped back, voice softening, that we all belong. The courtyard was silent. Then a slow clap. Maddie. Then another. And another. Until the applause filled the space like rising water. Afterward, as the crowd began to thin, Jeremiah stayed behind. He walked up to the mural and ran his fingers lightly across the painted lines. He didn't need to say anything. The wall spoke for him now. Ms. Keller came up beside him. You said more in 3 minutes than some people say in a lifetime. Jeremiah looked up. Do you think it'll last? She considered the question carefully. Maybe not on everyone's wall, but in the right hearts? Yes, it will. Maddie joined them. She had a smudge of yellow paint on her sleeve. My mom said she wants a copy of your drawing, she said. She said it made her cry. Jeremiah smiled, a quiet, content smile. Tell her she can have it. Ms. Keller put a hand on his shoulder. You know what I see when I look at that mural? Jeremiah raised an eyebrow. A voice that didn't echo into emptiness, she said. A voice that made other people speak up, too. He didn't respond right away. He just looked back one more time at the image on the wall. A cracked bridge. Children walking across. Words of hate shrinking behind them. Joy ahead. For the first time in a long while, Jeremiah felt seen. Not just heard. Seen. And in the quiet that followed, that feeling echoed louder than any word. Sometimes, the most important lessons don't come from politicians or professors. They come from children, like Jeremiah Brooks. His story wasn't about a fistfight. It wasn't about a mural. It was about what happens when a child is forced to carry the weight of adult silence. Jeremiah didn't just face teasing or playground meanness. He faced a quiet, persistent rejection from a world that claimed to care, but looked the other way when it mattered most. And yet, through his pain, he taught everyone around him something we've all forgotten. That silence, when faced with injustice, is not neutral. It's a choice. And that choice can echo louder than words. What began as a boy being told he didn't belong turned into a movement that shook an entire school. Why? Because someone finally chose not to stay quiet. A classmate spoke. A father stood firm. A teacher admitted she was wrong. And a child found his voice, not by yelling, but by creating something no one could ignore. For those of us who've lived through decades of change, progress, and painful setbacks, Jeremiah's journey is a reminder that every generation must fight their version of the same fight. Prejudice may look different now. It may hide in jokes, in silence, in who gets picked for the team, or who gets called on in class. But it's still there, and so must be our courage. Because when a child tells us, I just wanted to be seen, our answer can't be more silence. It has to be, we see you now. And more importantly, we're listening. Have you ever witnessed a moment, big or small, when a child was treated unfairly because of their race, and no one spoke up? What would you have done differently if you could go back? Jeremiah's story reminds us that racism doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers in silence, in avoidance, in the things adults don't say. In your experience, what are the subtle ways racism shows up in schools, families, or communities? And how do we begin to break that cycle? We'd love to hear your thoughts, your stories, your reflections. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to Unlocking Chains, because every voice matters, and together, we can make them heard.